Hello everyone, this is part 45 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The village hidden in the leaves did not receive many visitors, and as such, it only had 3 places for travelers to rest. The Octagon Shuriken was a high-class, high-price hotel, with a 5-star restaurant on ground floor and 4 large suites on each of the other 3 floors. It was commonly rented out to the most wealthy and influential clients of the Konoha, though occasionally some of the more well-off ninjas would rent a suite for a small party or a romantic evening. The Tsukino Inn had been the manor house of a now-defunct shinobi clan, but had been sold off and converted into a bed and breakfast in the Land of Mist style. It generally played host to foreign ninjas who had business with the Leaf, or to clients who were too frugal to stay at the Octagon Shuriken. And lastly, the Dragon's Roost was a seedy motel that failed to live up to its grand name. It was a refuge for the most desperate of penners, or for one-night stands between the Konoha's citizens. However, the 3 hotels were not often full, except for 2 weeks every 2.5 years, when the Leaf Village played host to the Chunin exams, and New Year's Eve. The Shuriken had been retrofitted after the last Chunin exam. At the center of the building there were now 4 fast, quiet elevators, 1 for each stack of suites. Gaining entry to each lift required the key to one of the 3 rooms it served, affording guests an additional level of security and privacy. Now the B elevator door opened onto the foyer of Suite 3B, and the porter slowly wheeled the room service cart out into the entryway. Unlike most Leaf civilians, he had little love or interest in the Leaf ninjas. He held no hate, fear, or prejudice towards them, he simply did not idolize them either, and with a few exceptions, could not have picked out a given ninja in street clothes from any other random citizen. Despite that, he was painfully aware of the identities of 4 of the suite's 13 inhabitants, and he checked the contents of the cart again, before knocking anxiously on the door. Just a minute, the supplication was cut off as the door suddenly swung inwards, accompanied by a half-dozen outraged shouts of, "Anko!" The porter's eyes widened at the sight of 11 women in various states of undress. All but 3 of them hid as quickly as they could, some simply diving behind the couches and chairs, but a few used ninjutsu to vanish into the suite's other rooms. The remaining 3 simply stared at him impassively, even the slender teen with long blonde hair who was completely topless. The brunette woman with the red triangle tattoos on her cheeks resumed tying her bustier, not paying him any further thought. "Do you have everything?" Anko Mitarashi demanded. The kunoiki's long, purple hair was loose for a change, and she had answered the door in a strapless bra and thong panty set that would not have stood up to the rigors of a ninja mission. She held herself proudly, even suggestively, and found it hard not to laugh as the young man struggled not to stare at her chest or hips. "Yes, ma'am," he croaked, taking the cover off the tray. It held 14 glasses of ice water, and a variety of lipsticks, blushes, hairsprays, and other cosmetic accoutrements. The uninhibited Jonin looked over their order and nodded, pulling the cart into the room. As she started to close the door, the attendant found his voice. What about my tip?" he asked quickly. "Your tip is telling me you already got your gratuity." Anko smirked, and her eyes flickered lower. The already blushing young man turned red from his forehead down to his neck, and he quickly turned and darted back to the elevator. Mitarashi closed the door, and Ino laughed lightly, finally reaching for her own strapless brassiere. "That was cruel, Anko, shortchanging him like that," Hana Inuzuka stated, though her tone didn't match her words. The veterinarian kunoiki finished securing her lingerie, and then stalked over, collecting a water and the lipstick she had requested from the tray. "Come on, that peak had to be worth at least 100 ryo," Anko chuckled. "You might have warned us first," Yugao chided her teammate, emerging from one of the bedrooms. "Most of us are not as unabashed as you 3 are, and using substitutions isn't good for keeping your hair in place." The Hyuga sisters emerged from behind one of the sofas, both red in the face, and Hinata nodded her agreement with the former Anbu operative. "I'm surprised you ducked out, Temari." Anko ignored her friend and addressed the sand shinobi as she and Sakura returned to the main room from the second bedroom. "You don't strike me as the bashful type." I acted on instinct, the blonde Jonan shrugged. She also grabbed a beverage, before returning to her bag. She shed her more utilitarian undergarments and began replacing them with more seductive versions. Like most of the women, her hair was loose. Now I feel even more sorry for you, Ino-san, Keiko Takamaki stated boldly as she and Mogi left their hiding place behind the other couch, and Sasam uncurled from her spot behind the recliner. Anko smiled at the teen dangerously, but the recovering genin met the Jonan's glare without flinching. If I minded, I would have hid like the rest of you, Yamanaka shrugged as she finished adjusting her bra. What's with you wimps? Orochimaru's former apprentice sounded genuinely annoyed. No one here has anything to be ashamed of, unless it's being a little too skinny. What would you do if you had to show some skin for an assignment? Hinata, Hanabi, Mogi, Sasam, and Sakura all blushed at the suggestion. But Yugao shook her head in objection. I don't think there is a woman here who would not expose herself, if it were truly necessary for her mission. The younger purple-dressed woman countered, but that is separate this situation. And I doubt your fiancé would be happy to learn you are flashing random porters to avoid paying a gratuity. I didn't do it to get out of tipping him. Anko looked slightly chagrined, that was just a bonus. I just didn't think it was worth waiting. Shizune-san, Tenten-san, do you want me to bring you your waters and the eyeliner? Sasam called to the north-facing bedroom where the last two kunoichi were still sequestered. Two statements of assent followed, and the P-redhead collected the mentioned items, and carried them into the other room. Temari moved behind Hana and began braiding the dog trainer's hair. Why is Shizune-san hiding in the other room? Hanabi asked softly, sliding on her camisole undershirt. Unlike most of the women, the youngest girl's new underwear was not designed for appeal. Sakura began to work on Keiko's hair, but the medic also surreptitiously checked on the 4 long scars on the younger woman's lower back. Senpai doesn't want Hana-san to see her before she is ready, Sakura answered, brushing out Takamaki's long, gray locks. Hanabi's pale eyes widened, and Moeji's jaw dropped for a moment. Ino fixed the Inuzuka kunoichi with an appraising gaze. Does that mean you two are going out tonight as more than just friends? Keiko prompted the tattooed kunoichi. Hana nodded carefully, so as not to pull her hair out of Temari's hands or disrupt the sand shinobi's movements. I'm sorry, Hanabi gasped. Most of the women chuckled at the teen's reaction, and Mogi realized she, Keiko, and Hanabi were the only ones who had not known the two women's plans constituted a proper date. Why? Hana asked, unperturbed. I didn't know you were, the younger woman trailed off. Since her encounter with Madara, she had become overly self-conscious about her treatment of others, and she did not want to risk offending the Tokujo. Interested in women. Hana finished for Hanabi, and the girl nodded contritely. I don't know that I am, the animal healer shrugged noncommittally. I've always found other women attractive, and not just in an aesthetic way. But I generally prefer men. I like the way they smell, and there is nothing like a long, hard. Temari coughed suddenly, and Hana trailed off. Hanabi had taken a play out of her older sister's book, and her face was a brilliant crimson. Mogi and Sasam were also blushing, though not as furiously. No longer an inexperienced virgin, Hinata still turned a little red, as did Sakura and Yugao. But Keiko leaned away from Sakura with an expectant look, and Ino nodded in agreement. Bicep to hold onto on a cold night, the Inuzuka daughter completed her statement, though none of the other women looked convinced by her dodge, but there was something about Shizune, she and I just clicked. There is a bit of an age difference, but we have so much in common, like our interest in medicine. And practice running herd on Untamed S. Anko interjected. Some of the kunoichi chuckled, and a few looked aghast. But Sakura smirked at the older woman, even as she pulled the Takamaki genin back into position. I'll try to remember not to mention that to the Hokage, Shizune called out from the other room, and Haruno nodded her agreement. And I would appreciate it if you didn't talk about Kiba-san in that fashion, Hanabi said softly. The other girls goggled at her, and then most burst out laughing. Damn it, Hanabi, Anko wiped tears of her face, you're gonna make me ruin my makeup. But that was good, Keiko complimented her teammate, and the young ninja smiled happily at the success of her jibe. So, I'm not clear, Hana asked carefully yet pointedly, does that mean you have forgiven my brother, or not? During her hospital stay, Kiba and Naruto had had a run-in outside of the younger woman's room. The dog trainer had taken the chance to get a few digs at the former Jinchuriki, including suggesting that the Kyuubi's death had been a lie to get people to accept him. But Hanabi had overheard them, and she had told Inuzuka to leave. After Kiba stalked off, she and Naruto had discussed his life as a demon host, cementing the forgiveness and acceptance between the tween and her older sister's fiancé. And the next time they had met, she had started using a new honorific to refer to Uzumaki. Well, I'm not sure. Hanabi blushed again, but this time not so thoroughly. I still think he should not have said those things to Naruto-Nisan, but he would not be Kiba-san if he did not feel and act in that way. And he also helped us, although I doubt that was what he intended, or that he would be pleased. Someone needs to give that guy an attitude adjustment, Ino snapped, flexing her fingers as if she wanted to slap him again. What do you think about Kiba's reaction, Hana-san? Hinata asked carefully yet curiously. Sume's eldest child considered that briefly, before speaking. My little brother is passionate and stubborn, she stated, like the rest of my family. He would rather hold a grudge than admit he is wrong. And he is endless to his opinion, even if I don't agree with him. Hinata nodded, thankful for a more moderate opinion of her friend and former teammate. Is that why you're not going out with the hound tonight, Chibi? Anko prompted. Hanabi shook her head. Kiba-san does not think of me in that way, she added as Ino grabbed her ears, to stop her head from moving. The immodest blonde began combing out the younger Hyuga's hair. I am not sure if he is oblivious to my interest, or is simply pretending he doesn't know. He's oblivious, Sakura snorted. How do you know that, Sakura-san? Hanabi looked slightly confused, and Ino had to steady her head again. He's a man. They're all oblivious, the pink-haired medic stated, and there was another round of head nodding by the kunoiki who were not currently having their hair styled. Oh, it's not just men, is it, Anko? Yugao stated so smoothly that those ladies who were not fully privy to Anko and Aruka's past missed the barb. The snake summoner stuck her tongue out at the other purple-tressed Jonin. Is that why you're going to with Kei-san? Mogi prompted Hanabi. No. Hanabi tried to shake her head slightly, but Ino was too quick and too strong for the younger teen to indicate her denial. Kei asked me, and I accepted. Even if Kiba-san had asked me later, I would not have abandoned my commitment. Even if Kei merely invited me out of obligation, and perhaps pity as well. Oblivious, Keiko mouthed the statement silently so Mogi, Hinata, Hana, and Temari could see her, but Hanabi, and thus the others, could not. Hinata grinned slightly and Temari chuckled. You are done, Mogi-chan, the elder Hyuga girl stated, as she finished securing the complex braid in the Genin's vivid orange locks. Thank you, Hinata-san, Mogi said, sliding forward, and checking the weaving in the mirror Hinata held up for her. What do you want me to do with your hair? Just a ponytail, I think, the white-eyed Tokujo answered as they switched places. Anything too fancy won't hold up, and I usually have it braided. Dancing again? Ino asked, rolling her eyes. But despite that, there was a hint of jealousy in her voice. Do you two own part of the golden shoe yet? We like dancing, Hinata said defensively, and it's good for timing and footwork. Plus it gives you two an excuse to hang all over each other in public, Tenten teased from the other room. Hinata blushed, yet also offered a small, sly grin. Then her expression cleared as she spoke again. And we aren't exactly going alone. Hinata glanced around the room, her gaze finally settling on Anko. Remembering Hinata's aborted party for his 16th birthday, Naruto had decided to rent the entire golden shoe for New Year's, dipping into Yukihana's savings for the first time to do so. All of the kunoiki in the suite, save one, and the dates, were attending, plus a few others not present. Naruto's buying the booze, I'm not about to say no to that, Anko shrugged, trying to cover her own love of the fancy dance hall. Try not to drink him out of house and home, Anko, Yugao suggested tactfully. You insisted Kei and I joined the rest of you, sister, Hanabi said, petulant in her uncertainty. You could have said no, Hinata frowned unhappily. No, it's fine, Hanabi said hastily, it isn't like we had any other plans. And I'm sure Kei will be more comfortable than if we were somewhere alone. What are you doing then, Ino? Sakura said rather pointedly. I managed to convince my father to let us attend the party, the blatant blonde answered smugly. Every year on New Year's Eve, the Yamanaka clan hosted a lavish soiree. Besides the other clan's leaders and wealthy local businessmen, some of Ino's mother's former associates in the fashion and entertainment industries were always in attendance. But only adults who were also of drinking age were generally invited. Sakura knew her friend and rival had been trying to wrangle an invitation for years. Wow, Mogi exhaled enviously, her eyes practically glittering like stars. Do you know who was there last year? I would rather spend New Year's with friends, the pink-haired medic interjected, and Hinata nodded. They had both taken the blonde comrade's rejection of Naruto's invitation somewhat personally. Well, not all of us get to spend a month lazing around on a movie set as bodyguards, Ino shot back, tugging on Hanabi's hair a little more firmly than she intended, making the younger woman grimace, so we have to take any chance to hobnob that we can get. It's too bad you won't be joining us, Sasam said neutrally, attempting to head off any more arguing, though I can understand wanting to spend the holiday with your family. Sakura and Ino continued glared at each other despite the thread user's words, until Hanabi squeaked in pain under the blonde's normally skillful hands, causing both of the older teens to relax. Yeah, well, if we get bored, maybe we'll swing by, Ino conceded. Keiko, you and Udon-san are coming to, aren't you? Hanabi prompted her teammate. Yes, the other girl answered, it isn't like a date, we were just going to the party, so we decided to go together instead of going alone. The gray-haired girl paused with an annoyed look. She and Sakura had finished styling one another's locks, Keiko also preferring a simple style, and the medic's short hair being easier to work with and offering fewer options. The genin was pulling up her dress, but it, like her new underwear, was more snug around her hips and butt than it had been when she had picked it. I need to get back to my normal workout schedule, the recently injured Kunoiki groused. Anko snorted, drawing a confused look from the teen. I don't think that will help, Keiko-chan, Yugao explained, you're going through puberty, your hips and bust are going to get bigger. But it's been over a year since my first cycle, she looked embarrassed to admit it, I thought I was going to stay more slender. You're hardly voluptuous, kid, Anko noted confidently. Your previous diet and exercise regimen hindered your growth, Sakura offered, and in an unhealthy way. But that changed while you were in the hospital and now that you're in physical therapy. And as long as you're under our care, you'll keep eating right, and letting your body develop naturally, Shizune lectured from the other room. You'll still probably never be as big as some of us, Ino leaned over and poked Hinata's left bee, mostly to illustrate her point. Hinata let out an angry squeak, but turned bright red as well. But what about Kei and I? The Takamaki girl sounded almost desperate, ignoring Yamanaka, we won't be able to fight as twins anymore. Kei-kun could always start dressing like a woman, instead, Hana offered with a mild grin. A few of the other women chuckled, and Keiko grinned sheepishly. We have discussed that option, in passing, Takamaki admitted, blushing. Maybe Naruto could teach Kei-kun the S-jutsu, Temari suggested, setting off another round of laughter and drawing horrified looks from both of the aforementioned Genin's teammates. I could ask Naruto, if you would like, Hinata added innocently, having mostly recovered from Ino's assault. Onizan. Hanabi squeaked in protest. You ladies are having too much fun, Tenten announced, emerging from the bedroom where she and Shizune had been sequestered. Her hair flowed behind her almost to her knees, Shizune having given the younger woman's tresses a wave that was just beyond subtle. The weapon expert's makeup was similarly understated, with just a hint of blush on her cheeks and a light pink gloss on her lips. Her dress was a shimmering green silk sheath, going over her left shoulder only. It ran almost down to her ankles, but had a slit in the left side that ran up to the middle of her toned thigh. She carried a small, black leather handbag, and wore matching pumps. If you don't hurry up, Neji's fiancé continued to admonish them, you won't be done before our reservation for this suite runs out. I'm trying, Keiko pouted, sliding her dress a few centimeters higher, but I don't want to tear it. Hold on a moment, Keiko-chan, Yugao approached the young woman, signing, ninja arts, alterations jutsu. The elegant warrior ran her fingers down the sides of Keiko's dress, straining against the young woman's curves. As she did, the dress loosened slightly, and the genin was able to slide it into place. Thank you, Yugao-san, the younger woman said in relief as she slipped her arms through the straps. The red dress was straight cut and ended just above the teen's knees. The moderately thick straps provided some extra coverage above her modest cleavage, and crossed in the back. You might not want to buy such tight-fitting clothes for the few years, Hana advised her, the canine trainer's eyes momentarily slipping away from the door Tenten had just exited. The other kunoichi all briefly looked at Keiko's hair, makeup, and outfit, and deciding it was acceptable, they returned to their own preparations. Sakura was the next to finish, and was arguably the most simply dressed. She wore a pale, yellow tank top, and a layered white skirt with a matching, short-sleeved, half jacket. Her lips had been tinted the color of her shinobi uniform, and she had applied a dark eyeliner to give more definition to her green orbs. She also frowned in spite of herself. Keiko's tight dress made it look like the younger woman was more voluptuous than the medic, though that was not far from the truth. Are you going to hide in there all night, Shizune? Anko prompted as Hana secured the belt on her pants. The veterinarian slipped her suit jacket on, and buttoned it. She wore no shirt underneath, and the cut of her coat showed more than a little décolletage as well as the top of her bustier. The pinstripes of the black material matched and complemented the light gray silk of Hana's undergarment. Her braided hair was tucked into the jacket, and the canine expert slipped a rakish fedora onto her head. I'm waiting for Hana to be done, the healer answered nervously, remaining out of sight. I'm ready, Shizune, the Inuzuka heiress stated, after checking her makeup and securing a gold chain so its sapphire pendant hung just above her cleavage. The master healer stepped into the room slowly. Her short, ebony hair had been given a layered style by Tenten, and the weapon mistress had also put a light crimson blush on Shizune's cheeks, and a darker shade on her thin lips. Shizune's dress was of a deep, almost black, purple satin, wrapping straight around her body and going down to her knees. There was a band of silvery silk under her cleavage that helped emphasize the medic's more modest curves. The sheath dress boasted 2 spaghetti straps, but was tight enough that they were more for show than for support. She also wore a silvery silk cuff around each of her wrists, and Sasam had no doubt that there were multiple senbon needles tucked into the decorative braces. I guess we know who wears the pants in that relationship, Anko noted shamelessly, still not bothering to put on anything clothes besides her lingerie. Actually, Shizune picked this out for me to wear, Hana said softly, her blush partially hidden by her clan tattoos. Most of the women looked at the Hokage's assistant in surprise, but Shizune just smiled sweetly at them. All done, Ino noted, stepping back from Hanabi, and offering the girl a mirror. Under the Chunan's expert hands, the youngest kunoichi's face had been carefully augmented with eyeliner and rogue, until she looked closer in age to Mogi than to Keiko, though the effect was aided by the early development she shared with her sister. Let me help you get dressed, Yamanaka added, so you don't wreck your hair. Hanabi nodded carefully, still marveling at her appearance in the looking glass. Ino had wrapped the younger Hyuga's long hair into a complex series of overlapping, ever-lengthening loops, the central arc hanging down to the middle of the tween's back. Ino lifted her tresses gently up as Hanabi stepped into her white gown, and slid her arms into the sleeves. Then the stylish shinobi zipped up the dress, and smoothed it over Hanabi's shoulders. The girl turned, shaking out the loose, calf-length skirt portion of her dress, and then dipped her head slightly to her artist. Thank you for all of your help, Ino-san, she said in earnest grawled. Sure thing, kid, the mentalist answered, having picked up some of her new teacher's vocal tics. What do you want me to do with your hair? The young woman asked, sliding behind Yamanaka. I'm not as skilled as you are. Can you do a merging triple braid? The blonde asked. Hanabi trailed off. It's easy, I'll talk you through it, the Chunin offered. Start by splitting my hair in 3 like you would for a normal braid. After she and Shizune finished looking at each other's ensembles, Hana started her own work on Temari's hair. Unlike the others, the Sand Jonin had not waited until her hair was done to get dressed. She had slipped on an alligator skin vest, low cut and ending just above her navel. Below the waist Gaara's sister wore a matching miniskirt and thigh-high boots. She started applying her lipstick, as the vet started combing out her long, golden hair. What do you want, Temari? Hana asked. I agree with Hinata, just a ponytail will be fine, the fan wielder decided, anything more would be troublesome. She frowned, and set down the lipstick angrily. I can't believe I just said that, she complained, as the others started laughing again. It could be worse, Sakura noted through her chuckles, at least you aren't running around saying, believe it. I only did that once, Hinata protested softly as she turned bright red. Temari smiled appreciatively at the teammates. Mogi finished securing Hinata's ponytail, and the white-eyed woman and the younger redhead started getting dressed. Konohamaru's comrade and girlfriend slipped into a simple, silver, loose-fitting tail gown. Unlike most of the other kunoichi, Moeji's dress was designed to mask the 14-year-old's slender build, rather than cling to her curves. Hinata's dress was a charcoal cotton sheath that tied around her neck, but with cutouts to make it look that the top was 2 strips of material wrapping around her body. But instead of baring her skin, the gaps were filled with a gossamer orange fabric. The lower, skirt part of the gown was solid and hung just past her knees. Hinata slipped on a pair of dark gray pumps, and rechecked her makeup, though as usual, she wore very little. Good job, Hanabi, Ino complimented the girl as she finished verifying Hanabi's work on her hair. She then collected her little black dress, and slipped into it. She zipped it up, and then adjusted it around her bust so that her undergarment did not peek out of the low-cut top. Sakura and Shizune both cringed visibly at the 6-inch stiletto heels Yamanaka removed from her bag. With those, you'll be taller than Choji, Anko warned her student. It's okay, Ino shrugged as she buckled her shoes on, Choi likes me in heels. Sasam nodded as she buttoned up her artificially faded, forest green, fitted, silk blouse. After smoothing her top into place, she slid on her black, pleated skirt and snapped and belted it tightly around her waist. She also had heels, but even if they had been high enough to boost her height by a foot, she would not have been taller than her date, Shino. She looked over herself, and then at the other women, frowning slightly. I look more like an office woman than someone going to a party, she said sadly. You look lovely, Sasam, Yugao reassured her charge. You should have more confidence, Hinata added, I am sure Shino will like it, too. Sakura grinned and raised an eyebrow at the irony of her friend's statement, a fact most of the other women caught as well, though they did not laugh this time, both for Hinata and for Sasam. The thread user nodded, and slung her purse over her shoulder before putting on her shoes. I'm surprised you're not wearing a kimono, Ino-chan, Shizune noted, her attention shifting to the less practiced healer. I remember the Yamanaka parties always being very traditional. That sort of faded away the last few years, Ino shook her head carefully, besides a kimono is too much of a hassle. She winked at Temari as she said that, and the sand ninja snorted. Yugao shook her head as she removed her dress from its hanger. Her choice was also black, but was a shimmering material, unlike the matte cloth of Ino's and Sasam's outfits. It had a mildly plunging neckline, and was low-cut into the back. It flowed down to the Jonan's ankles with a short slit on either side. You could have been a model, Yugao-san, Mogi noted in awe. The former Anbu agent smiled, yet shook her head in denial. It would be too exposed for me, Kakashi's fiancé countered, I like my privacy. A few of the other kunoichi nodded their agreement. As the conversation dropped off, the other women all started staring at Anko. The serpent user still was clad only in her underwear, and under the gaze she leaned back lazily and took a steady sip of her water. What? She asked innocently. Were you planning to get dressed any time soon? Shizune asked sharply. I was thinking about going like this, Mitarashi shot back smugly, but without even a hint of teasing or sarcasm. But it's almost freezing outside, Mogi stated. I have a coat. The golden shoe might not have the firmest dress code, Hinata argued, her cheekbones gaining a touch of red that was not from cosmetics, but I don't think they would let you in like that. Everything is covered that needs to be, Anko shrugged. Besides, Naruto reserved the whole place, so he's in charge, right? The phone rang, and Yugao answered it. As she started speaking quietly into the receiver, Shizune prompted, stop playing around, Anko. All right, thank you, Yugao concluded, before gracefully setting down the handset. She turned back to the rest of the kunoichi. That was the manager, she informed them. He wanted to remind us that we have to check out in 10 minutes, and to let us know that there are some people downstairs waiting for us, though he did not elaborate further. Fine, Anko sighed in defeat. She opened her garment bag, and took out the aquamarine frock contained therein. She shimmied into the tight-fitting dress, pushing it down to her knees. It covered more than most of the other women would have expected, with strips coming out from the sides and wrapping over her opposing shoulder, before connecting again to the main part of the dress in the center of the back. Yugao took note that it left her friend's entire neck and collarbone uncovered. Happy? She asked. Though she sounded annoyed, there was a buried tone of worry in the forward Jonan's voice. You look almost like a proper woman, Anko, Azuki winked at her former teammate. Damn, I knew I should have went with the hot pink halter top, she shot back, but she turned a little red, and smiled slightly at the compliment. Alright ladies, let's not keep the boys waiting. Anko grabbed Yugao and Hinata's arms, seemingly roughly, but in such a way that she didn't muss their hair or clothing. Well, except you two, she smirked at Hana and Shizune, who linked elbows in a more intimate fashion. Ino slipped out onto the balcony, taking a deep breath of the crisp air, and letting it out as a long sigh. A few moments later she heard the door open and close again. A jacket dropped over her shoulders. Thanks, Choji, she said quietly, recognizing his lover's footsteps. You don't seem to be enjoying yourself, he rumbled gently, without any preamble. What's not to enjoy? She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. All the important people in the village are in there, standing around talking and sipping wine. The daimyo came, with his wife and daughter. And I haven't seen Nyoko for almost a year. I think I saw the stars of Minako's favorite soap. Yuki Fujika's is even here. Choji recognized part of her annoyance stemmed not just from the staid environment, but from her recognition of the fact her father had only let them attend because the Hisoka Honokata had brought his own underage offspring along. Not anymore, he countered. Yuki snuck out about an hour ago to go to Naruto's party. Nyoko went with her. They both thought it was pretty boring here. Ino grunted indistinctly, not wanting to let on that she agreed. We could still head over to the Golden Shoe, Choji offered. And listen to Sakura gloat. Ino snorted, no, thank you. Then you better come back inside, before you catch a cold, he told her carefully. She finally turned to look at him, and decided again he looked almost debonair in his tux. Although, she said sneakily after a moment's thought, someone should probably make sure Yuki and Nyoko made it to the shoe safely. Neither of them are familiar with the village, and it is pretty dark out. Aha, Choji grinned knowingly. Come on, we better hurry, in case they got lost, she insisted, all but charging for the door. You should have just said yes in the first place, he grumbled quietly, before following his girlfriend. I am very sorry, Sakura, Lee said again, even with all of my shinobi training, I do not seem to be very nimble on the dance floor. It's alright, Lee, she told him, sending chakra into her foot as she rubbed at the newly forming bruise. We'll just stick to the slow songs for now, okay? That would be fine, he stood up straighter at the suggestion. Then he turned back to the platform, with a look of envy. There were only 3 couples dancing at the moment, because the fast pace of the song and the grandiose movements had caused the other pairs to retreat to the safety of the eating area, though most of them still watched with varying emotions. No one ever told me Naruto could do that, Nyoko Honokata commented to no one in particular. She craned her head to look past Shizune and Hana, watching the youngest couple dancing with a hint of jealousy. Hinata-Nisan and Naruto-Nisan regularly come here to dance, Hanabi Hyuga answered, pausing as she was carrying a pair of drinks back to the table she shared with her teammates and Udon. The Fire Princess turned to speak with the younger woman. You must be Hanabi, Nyoko noted, the girl's pale eyes confirming the honorifics the kunoichi had used. The tween nodded slightly, and the royal continued, I'm Nyoko, a friend of your sister. Hanabi's eyes went wide as she realized whom she was talking to, and she bowed deeply, sloshing soda out of the glasses. Forgive my impertinence, Highness, the genin said, her lifelong training meshing with her recent personality shift to leave her thoroughly mortified that she had casually spoken to such an important personage. What impertinence? Nyoko asked kindly, it's a party and you talk to me. Thank you, Hanabi bowed again, and then quickly said, I'm very sorry, but I must get my teammate his drink. If you will please excuse me. Of course, the flame-haired teen agreed sadly, don't let me keep you. Hanabi hurried back to her seat, and Nyoko sighed. It's annoying, isn't it? Kyuki Kazuhana noted as she rejoined the younger noble, but it could be worse, I get to deal with those kinds of reactions both as a star and as a daimyo. I'm used to it, Nyoko bobbed her shoulders slightly, though I don't usually have to worry about it here. There are some people here who treat me like a person, not a tiara. Her eyes followed a certain blonde man as she said it, and Yuki chuckled. Yeah, Naruto is definitely like that, the actress concurred. Then she lowered her voice and whispered conspiratorially, you have it pretty bad for him, don't you? Nyoko stammered, struggling to keep her voice down. No, I just think he would be a good candidate for my consort and strengthen the Honokata line. She trailed off, noticing the elder princess's look of amused disbelief. Is it that obvious? Not that obvious, Kayuki admitted, but I do have an advantage. I used to carry a torch for Kakashi Hatake. Nyoko's eyes widened in surprise, and she shifted her attention to where the white-haired ninja danced with his partner. She had to admit, for an older man, he cut a dashing figure. The fire princess turned her gaze back to her snow counterpart thoughtfully, considering the other woman's use of the past tense. So, how did you get over him? Nyoko asked. I realized he would only ever be happy with a kunoichi, Yuki answered, a touch of sadness in her voice. Yeah, Naruto is probably the same. Come on, Yuki put her hands on the teen's shoulders. It looks like those six are finally letting other people back on the dance floor. Dance with me. But you're a girl, too, Nyoko protested lightly. So, if those two can do it, why can't we? She waved at the table where Hana and Shizune had settled, both breathing heavily. Beside, who else here is suitable to dance with a princess? Kayuki winked at the younger woman, and Nyoko let herself be pushed forward to the stage. Wow, Hana panted, before carefully taking a sip of water. She set the glass down, and Shizune caught it up, drinking from the other side. I had heard the rumors about Naruto and Hinata, the vet continued, but I didn't think Kakashi and Yuga would be able to outdo us as well. I wouldn't say any of them outdid us, Shizune said, placing her hand over Hana's. The gesture was not just an expression of familiarity and affection, the medic also gently sent some of her chakra into the other woman, easing her fatigue. Hana's eyes flashed as she recognized the technique, and she turned her hand over so that they were palm to palm. The younger healer sent her chakra back into Shizune, restoring the black-haired woman's energy in kind. Ready to go back out there? Hana inclined her head. Let's wait for the next slow song, the Hokage's assistant suggested, tightening her grip on the vet's hand slightly. Okay, how is your leg? Sasam asked carefully, as she and Shino sat down. Sasam, his impassive voice held a whisper of irritation as he addressed his date. I have been back on active duty for 3 months. I appreciate your concern, but my prosthetic is fully adjusted, the feeling is fine and I have full control. I know, she said softly, it's just this dancing isn't the same as our normal work. My thighs are burning, so I was worried. Then perhaps I should be the one worried for you, Shino countered in fond amusement, for I am not tired at all. Do you want to take a break? No, she shook her head, I'm fine. I just need to sit out a song. And maybe have a little snack. A piece of cake or something. I'll get you something, he said, standing. No, she surged to her feet, and in her haste bumped into him. Shino caught her, both to keep her from falling and to maintain his own balance. But even after they were steadied, he held onto her for a few extra moments. Then Sasam blushed and they separated. Allow me, please, he stated, and she nodded. She watched him without sitting as Shino maneuvered gracefully through the crowd towards the buffet tables. 10, 9, 8. As preparations for the big countdown began, the dancing stopped, and the various couples secured spots in the recently darkened room. The handful of individuals who attended alone, as well as those pairs who were just friends, or just teammates, conglomerated next to the dance floor. Some looked around for a partner, even those who had dates. And a number of eyes turned to the princess and the actress. Yuki leaned in, and whispered something in Nyoko's ear. The younger noble nodded, and the two women closed ranks and lightly clasped arms. 7, 6, 5. Where are Naruto and Hinata? Kakashi whispered in Yugao's ear, holding his fiancée loosely in preparation. I don't know, she answered, I haven't seen him since the band went on break. 3, 2, 1. Nyoko and Yuki quickly embraced, and each kissed the other on the cheek, just enough to dissuade the hopefuls. Similarly, Keiko and Hanabi gave Udon and Kei a quick peck on the cheek, respectively. Sakura's K for Lee was similarly brief, but Haruno applied her lips to her date's mouth. Konohamaru and Mogi shared a proper smooch, but the kunoichi was more forceful than her boyfriend, who hastily pulled away before anyone could see them, though she followed him to extend the lip lock slightly. Shino glanced around the room, while Sasam watched him anxiously. After a few seconds, he put his right hand on her left shoulder, and leaned down to kei her experimentally. Sasam lifted up onto her toes to meet him, but the insect trainer hastily pulled away a moment after their mouths touched. He pursed his lips in uncertainty. You didn't have to do that, if you didn't want to, the thread user said carefully, trying not to show her disappointment at his reaction. It is tradition, he answered, his voice as flat as usual. I would not want to risk an unlucky year by flaunting it. Oh, of course. Nor am I necessarily opposed to KU, he said, with a tone of nervousness concealed in his words. Oh. Sasam tried to remain neutral, but a slight smile creased her face. Across the room, the recently arrived Choji and Ino broke apart with matching happy sighs. In the most hidden corner of the golden shoe, Shizune pinned the slightly taller Hana to the wall. She gently swept aside a wisp of brown hair framing the younger woman's face, and cupped her tattooed cheek. Then the medic pressed her face to the vet's, bringing their lips together hungrily. Shizune gently pressed her tongue into Hana's mouth, and the dog trainer responded tentatively. More than a few moments after most of the other couples had concluded the ritual, and just as the lights started to come back up, the two women finally disconnected. They stared into each other's eyes, each surprised but also contented. I think it's going to be a good year, Hana whispered, and Shizune nodded silently. As the countdown ended, and the fireworks started outside, Shikamaru and Temari glared at one another. You're really not going to kei me? She demanded, her voice soft yet harsh. Why would I? He answered, his tone more controlled, because some stupid superstition says I have to. We're modern ninjas, Temari, you know there is no magic, and the only way we could be cursed to have a bad year is if someone placed a fuinjutsu on us. And I doubt that, if that were the case, any random stranger would remove the seal. Is it really such an imposition to kei me? She asked, this time sounding more hurt than mad. If I'm being forced to do it for no good reason. Yeah. For no good reason. She stammered in disbelief. But before she could cry or get angry, he hopped forward and planted his lips on hers. She looked shocked, and did her best to resist his ministrations. But after a few heartbeats she closed her eyes and pressed in closer. However, when the kei ended she fixed him with a dangerous expression. You think that is going to, she hissed at him, but he cut her off with a finger to her lips. Superstition. Not a good reason to kei you, he told her, because you want me to kei you. All the reason I need. Her eyes softened for a moment, before returning to a look of mock anger. Don't think you're getting off that easy, Buster, she told him firmly. Of course not, he sighed. As befit the environment, Neji and Kakashi dipped their respective fiancés. Neji massaged Tenten's lips hungrily, while Kakashi's Kyugao lingeringly, parting their lips slightly without using his tongue. Both men carefully lifted their blushing lovers back to their feet. Anko and Aruka's kei was the longest, and to the outside observers, looked almost like a sparring match. After a while, some of the onlookers realized that the two jonin were each trying to dip the other. The struggle lasted for a few minutes, and their hands began roaming. Hanabi, Kei, Sasam, and Konohamaru all blushed at the display, but none of them looked away. Finally Kakashi walked up next to them and loudly cleared his throat. If you plan to keep that up, you better go home, before you get arrested, the ranking shinobi informed them. Anko glared at him, but Aruka turned beet red, and he stealthily smoothed his girlfriend's dress back into place as he put a sliver of distance between them. Fine, Mitarashi grumbled, then loudly demanded, where's our host? We need to get the music started again. On the roof of the golden shoe, Naruto reluctantly took his lips away from Hinata's, even as he pulled her closer under the blanket he had draped over their shoulders. They stood there, watching the decorative explosions blossom overhead, sharing their body heat, the great affection, and their smoldering passion. Happy New Year, Hina-chan, Naruto said lovingly. Happy New Year, Naruto, she answered joyfully. As winter melted without protest into spring in the land of fire, the rumors of odd warriors causing problems blossomed into real, known incidents of mysterious shinobi. The interlopers were acting much like common bandits, except they wore full stealth shozaku, and possessed chunin-level skills. The renegades were also notable in the colors of the uniforms. Unlike the matte black color of a standard stealth shozaku, these rogues' costumes were made of dark tan, dark forest green, dark navy blue, dark red, or dark gray material. But besides the coloring, the uniforms were identical, and none of them wore a headband or any other sort of village insignia. Most of the ninja villages had lost agents to the attacks, including a team of Chunin and their Tokujo leader from the Hidden Leaf. And so far, no one had been able to capture any of the attackers alive. What was not common knowledge was that a small number of the dead raiders had been identified. The sand and mist had both been able to determine who some of the renegades had been. 2 had been missing nin, but the others were all simple bandits with no previous ninja training. How they had suddenly acquired the ability to go toe-to-toe with a fully vetted shinobi was a question the Conclave of Shadows had not been able to answer, and as such, the 5 cages were keeping a tight hold on that bit of information. As a result of the strange happenings, the hidden villages had stepped up the training efforts, and any off-duty ninja not a tokubutsu or full jonin had been pressed into extra classes to make sure their skills were up to date, and to encourage them to learn some addition ninjutsu or taijutsu. And though they were not forced, many of the higher-ranked warriors had also increased their practice regimens, or had called upon their colleagues to share their knowledge. 98, 99, 500, Naruto finished calling out, and both he and Hinata slumped slightly at the end of the set. Spring had come early, and despite the fact that it was barely into March, the engaged shinobi were dressed in their summer uniforms for the day's practice. I think that's enough taijutsu, Naruto, the young woman told her lover. Yeah, you're probably right, he agreed, slightly less winded thanks to the fox blood Kekkei Genkai. I just want to make sure we get all the new techniques down. It changes the tiger and heron more than I expected. It was nice of the Hokage to give us your father's part of the scrolls, she noted. Niece. He snorted, mildly annoyed. Grandma Tsunade should have given us the scrolls back when we first started studying the tiger and heron. She smiled indulgently, and did not bother to contradict him. Naruto shook his head, knowing he had gone over this before, both with his fiancée and with his surrogate aunt, grandmother. He saw no reason to waste their time dredging it up again. All right, our muscles may be sore, but we've still got our chakra, he stated before asking, should we work on some ninjutsu? Are you sure you don't want to work on genjutsu? Hinata suggested, trying not so sound evasive. Naruto frowned, and studied her face. Uzumaki could still be somewhat dense, but he had spent enough time with his girlfriend, that he was able to recognize the tiny catch in her voice. No thanks, he grimaced hyperbolically, we just did genjutsu yesterday, and even if I can use genjutsu now, I'm not really into it. Besides, weren't we going to spend more time refining the Rasengan? I know we pretty much gave up on a Doton Rasengan, but we could try a Kaiten Rasengan. Or we could work on getting you to the point where you can do the Raiten Rasengan without using a clone. Well, Hinata started, but found she could not finish the statement. What is it? Naruto asked quickly, with a hint of anticipation, did you already get it? No, it's not that. Sakura drew her new bow nervously yet deliberately. She sighted along the arrow, careful not to let the fletching touch her cheek. The medic had drawn her own blood more than once, by letting the stiff fibers slice her skin as she loosed a missile, but she no longer made that mistake. The powerhouse Kunoichi held the arrow launcher at extension for a few moments, watching and listening for any strain in its limbs. She did not want to doubt her teammates' craftsmanship, but she had broken no small number of bows in her early practice, and she knew Uzumaki was not well versed in archery or its tools. But the recurve short bow answered her strength easily, and did not so much as shudder as she tested it. Moderately reassured, the medic loosed the arrow. The missile shot across the practice field faster than the medic intended. It struck an inch off of the bull's eye, but despite the blunt head of the practice arrow, sank into the target up to the fletchings. Sakura blinked for a moment in surprise. The target was a 1-foot-thick layer of tightly woven, replaceable hay, a rough analog for the human body, attached to a 2-inch-thick wooden plank. For her arrow to have gone so deep, it must have fully penetrated the stronger backing. And she had not even taken a full draw on the weapon. For the first time she began to take seriously Kakashi's suggestion of what she might be able to do with a bow. The pink-haired young woman sighed as she realized her archery instructor was late. There were no S or even A rank masters of the bow in the Hidden Leaf village, not since Yukihana Uzumaki's death. But there were a handful of shinobi with B rank skills in archery, and Sakura was taking turns studying with 3 of them. Just as she started to pull back a second arrow, she heard unmasked footstep approaching, and as she eased the string back to its default state, another Jonin jogged effortlessly onto the target range. Good morning, Sakura. I apologize for my tardiness. Neji Hyuga inclined his head slightly as he greeted her. That's all right, Neji, the younger shinobi offered. Kakashi-sensei would have been much later, and I know you and Tenten have been having trouble getting time alone. Haruno knew that Neji's fiancé had been spending more time with Hinata, though now the lessons were going both ways, with the younger woman helping the older teen with her taijutsu. On top of that, the weapons mistress had been working with many of the village chunin, at the Hokage's request. That was part of the reason why Sakura had asked Neji to teach her the bow, instead of Tenten. She had learned that both of the Jonin had inherited all of Might Guy's archery skills, the boisterous Jonin insisting that with his Byakugan, Neji could be an expert marksman. Though she would have preferred Tenten, Neji was an easy second over Guy. And Sakura had to admit, Neji had loosened up over the last few years, and was a better and more patient teacher than she would have expected. Yes. Well, Neji grinned in chagrin, but there was a hint satisfaction under his stammer, and Sakura could not prevent a twinge of jealousy. Is that the bow that Naruto crafted for you? Hinata's cousin quickly changed the subject. His eyes fell on the weapon, and he whispered, Byakugan. Yes, the medic nodded, I was just trying it out. She did not tell him that she had been in possession of the weapon for almost 2 weeks, but she had been too nervous to use it. But 2 days prior she had snapped another practice bow while working with Genma, so she had decided she had to get over it and test the weapon crafted specifically for her strength. He said he based it on a design his mother was working on. She voiced the other source of her worry, though she tried to mask it as just a random comment. May I? Neji asked, and Sakura handed him the short bow. Purple heart, bronze, silk scrolls with jutsu inscribed in silver ink, oak, elk horn. The Hyuga ninja enumerated the first few layers, staring into the weapon. Then he tried to tug gently on the string, and could barely budge it. He grimaced, planted his feet, and pulled back more firmly, but could only get a few finger lengths of draw out of the bow. He considered using his chakra to bolster his strength, but decided that even then, he would be lucky to get the string back halfway. What is the draw weight? He asked, returning the weapon to her, and taking his own short bow out of a scroll. 350 pounds, she answered, trying not to sound like she was boasting, and not entirely succeeding, and if I send enough chakra into the limbs, the jutsu in here should increase the arrow's speed by another 20%. The Hyuga Jonin paused in amazement as he calculated the speed and power of the missile. He exhaled sharply. That is a very dangerous weapon, he conceded, but it is still only as good as its user. Shall we get to work? Yes, sensei, she stated with trace of irony. Shadow clone jutsu, Hinata placed her hands together, and spawned a single copy. After a small amount of affectionate cajoling by her lover, the young woman had agreed to show him what she had been working on in private. The original Hinata held up her hands, forming a small cradle with her fingers. Chakra began to spin rapidly above her palms. The duplicate beauty leaned in, and her fingers began dancing around the ball, changing the structure of the still-forming Rasengan. The blue sphere became striated, with bands of darker blue and nearly white chakra forming. The edge of the orb grew indistinct, almost misty, and Naruto thought he felt a thin, cool fog settling onto his exposed skin. The clone stepped back and vanished, her work complete. The spiraling globe stabilized, and Hinata lifted the cloudy, streaked ball with her right hand. Suten, Rasengan, she whispered apologetically. Naruto padded closer, looking closely at the sphere. As he closed the distance, the foggy feeling turned to one of sea spray, though there was no aroma of salt. He lifted his head, his critical expression changing to one of excitement. That's awesome, Hinata, he told her. Her shoulders relaxed, and she sighed in relief. Were you really that afraid to show it to me? He asked, surprised but also disappointed. You were really upset last week, when Sakura and I were able to learn the Hand of Waves jutsu, she reminded him, and you couldn't. But that was about me, not you two, he reassured her, then grumbled quietly, I just can't get the hang of water chakra. Probably something the fox did to me. You can still use 4 elements very well, she complimented him, that is more than most Jonin, even the S-rank ones. And I can't use air chakra, so we are both in the same situation. Yeah, He agreed gratefully, touching her cheek, and now you have your water Rasengan, like I have my wind Rasengan, so we're even there, too. So what's it like? It is cool, if not cold enough to make ice, she explained, and it seems to break apart both fire and lightning techniques, though I haven't tested it too much yet. Other than that, it is just a somewhat stronger version of the Rasengan. Want to try it out? He asked eagerly. I can work on some of my newer Kaiten and Raiten jutsu, and we can see how your Rasengan works on them. Sound good? Alright, she nodded happily, and assumed her fighting stance, the aqueous sphere at the ready. Naruto hopped back, and started signing. Excellent, Neji noted, I can tell you are still adjusting to that bow, but those groupings are as good as you have ever shot. Thanks, Sakura exhaled in release as she lowered her weapon. She had never known shooting to be a workout, but her arms both ached from the shoulder down. She decided it was probably because she had not previously had a bow that matched her power. Does that mean we can start working on archery jutsu? She asked carefully. Of her 3 instructors, Neji was the most stringent, and he was requiring her to master the basics before he would teach her any advanced arts. Not yet, he shook his head, but we are ready for the next steps, hitting moving targets, and firing while on the move. He took out a number of training kunai, soft rubber blades with a dense metal core. They mimicked the size and weight of a real ninja blade, but only inflicted large bruises instead of lethal cuts. Will you still be able to hit your target while under attack? He asked without mockery, and ran halfway up one of the larger trees before tossing one of the knives at her. Sakura ducked even as she fired, and her arrow skipped off the edge of the target. Gai-sensei's archery style is oddly lacking in flash, considering the source, the Hyuga Jonin informed his student as he blended into the foliage, but instead emphasizes mastery of the bow under what Gai-sensei considers more realistic conditions. Sakura ducked under another kunai, and knocked her next missile. She grimaced when the third blunted blade bounced off her knee, but she also could not help but appreciate the philosophy behind Might Guy's style. She rolled forward, and fired again. 2, 3. Hinata forced out the count while struggling to keep her breathing steady. The third sphere formed over her middle finger, and she started concentrating her chakra over her ring finger. It began to spin more slowly than the first 3, and the pale beauty closed her eyes and started breathing faster from the effort. Finally, another miniature Rasengan appeared over her 4th digit. 4. She groaned, her pale orbs still squeezed tightly shut. Her face started to flush, and her breathing turned to panting, and before she could start to form the last orb, the first 4 dissipated. I just can't get it, she said sadly. He laughed and pulled her in close. Hinata, it took me like 4 months for master the 5 points Rasengan, he chided her lovingly, squeezing her a little tighter. I know, she agreed, but you were just using it to practice your chakra control, and happened to discover it worked as an attack. I'm trying to learn it as a jutsu. Besides, She trailed off, upset with herself for even thinking it. But part of her could not help but think that she had better chakra control than her lover. Even with the loss of the demon's disruptive influence, and all of his training, Hinata knew she could still shape her ki noticeably faster and much more efficiently than Naruto could. But at the same time, she could not deny that he also had an unmatched talent for learning new jutsu. Even though she and Sakura could both use ninja arts with greater precision and less energy than their male teammate, Naruto was frequently the one to execute those techniques first. Hinata could not help but wish she had that ability as well. I have you teaching me, she concluded, shoving those small sparks of envy and superiority deep into her mind. Well, Naruto considered her statement, I guess if I'm supposed to be teaching you, maybe I should do something to help you. No, I didn't mean, she countered quickly. No, you're right, Hinata, he shook his head, but what can I do for you? He pondered that for a moment, and then brightened as he thought of something. Hey wait, he suddenly said, you've never got a close look at the 5 points Rasengan with your Byakugan, right? She thought back and shook her head. Though she had studied most of his other Rasengan variations, she had never asked to see the 5 points, thinking it just 5 small copies of the spiraling sphere. The only time she had ever looked at it with her bloodline had been during the final battle between Naruto and Orochimaru, and then she had been more focused on what was happening with Sasuke and Orochimaru's chakra supplies. So, why don't you use the Byakugan and Karaname jutsu? Then we can compare what you're doing to what I do, and see if there is any difference. Alright, she nodded with a hopeful look. Naruto reached out, and grasped her left with his own, linking their fingers. Naruto, you don't need to do that. I can use Karaname without contact now. Despite her protest, Hinata didn't sound unhappy. I know, he grinned, but it does make it easier, right? And I need contact to replenish your chakra supply. I'm still okay, she said softly as he gently sent his energy into her, and I have some food pills, too. Well, maybe I just wanted to hold your hand. But if you don't want me to. She tightened her grip on him, as he expected, and he squeezed her fingers in turn. She smiled sheepishly, and he smirked back. Despite the advanced state of their relationship, she could still be quite shy when they were outside of a locked room. Ready? He prompted her. Yes. Suijin Byakugan. She did not bother to stagger her activation, but went directly to her second-level Kekkei Genkai Dojutsu. Karaname Jutsu, Hinata linked herself to Naruto, and he closed his eyes, relying solely on her sight. Okay, he mumbled, lifting his right hand, slightly off balance due to his external perspective. A cloud of chakra formed over each of his upturned fingertips, quickly congealing into 5 turbulent orbs. Hinata frowned in thought, immediately noticing something about Uzumaki's complete version of the technique. What is that thread? She asked, pointing with her free hand to a thin circle of chakra, connecting the 5 spheres. Naruto pursed his lips, and leaned forward, even though it did not change his vantage at all. Don't know, Naruto shrugged carefully, so not to disrupt his jutsu or their contact, I didn't know I was doing that. It looks like you are both supporting the shape of the individual spheres, and helping to keep their internal speed steady, she noted, already trying to figure out how she could achieve the same effect. Now, your turn, Naruto whispered, shifting his focus in Hinata's all-around gaze to his fiancée's right hand. Yes, my turn, she said hesitantly. Just do the first 3, he recommended, that should be enough for now, and we want to get a good look at him, right? Yes, she repeated. She sent energy down her hand, and crafted each of the 3 orbs in turn. Naruto's face scrunched as he considered her efforts. You are putting a lot of chakra into those, he offered. But it has to have the same power as a normal Rasengan, right? She countered. Yeah, but that just means you have to keep the speed and force of the threads the same, he explained. If you don't make the threads shorter, and use fewer of them, it becomes impossible to get them from getting tied up in knots. When I do it, each of the little spheres is only like about 15% of the chakra of a full-sized Rasengan. Quote. Her thoughtful look deepened as she considered his words. But if you could get the full amount of chakra into such a small ball, she muttered. I can't imagine the level of control that would take, he pondered out loud, and I'm not sure what that accomplish anyway. After all, the resonating thing is what makes the 5 points Rasengan work, isn't it? Yes, you're right, she agreed, but with a hint of something else in her voice. She dismissed all of her jutsu, but continued holding his hand. Thank you, Naruto, she said earnestly, I think this will help me a lot. Anytime, Hinata, he answered happily, taking her other hand too. Dinner? He asked. Yes, she bobbed her head. It sounds like the test runs have been successful, the woman wearing the face of Tsunade stated in the Hokage's voice. She cut a small slice off her pork chop, and took it into her mouth seductively. Yes, Nagato said, not looking up from his plate. The Rinnegan user's face was looking less drawn and pale, but he had double helpings of both the entree and the salad. Across from him, Konan cut into her food vengefully. Kohaku, stop teasing Nagato, please, Guki requested. Despite his amusement, I need him and Konan to focus right now. Fine, the Jinchuriki of the 6 Tails Chameleon sighed in disappointment, and changed into her normal guise. I just can't believe he used to have a crush on his teacher's teammate, she simpered. Do you think Jiraiya knew? Enough, the renegade Namikaze said more firmly. She pouted slightly as she settled back, but waved her hand for her husband to continue. Nagato. Yes, Pain's base took a breath to focus himself. In general, the Shizokas have proven a match for the shinobi of the hidden villages. They have taken more losses than we have, but that could be attributed to numbers and surprise. Which brings us to you, Konan. Their leader shifted his gaze. How is Madara faring? He is exhausted, the origami user reported, not bothering to mask her pleasure at the immortal's discomfort, so much that I was forced to give him a few days off. Will we have the resources to proceed with the first phase? We are ready, Guki-sama, she answered, before sipping her tea. Good, he smiled pleasantly, then as planned, we will begin the initiative on March 14th, White Day. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.